All right. The time is now 3 p.m. Again, welcome. Thank you for joining the Affordable Housing and Disasters webinar. This webinar is being recorded, so just be mindful that your mics at this time are in listening mode only. We will have points throughout the webinar where you will have an opportunity to ask questions and have a live mic. If you have questions throughout the webinar, certainly feel free to utilize the chat feature where you can type in your questions, and we will definitely make sure that they are answered on this webinar. At this time, I definitely want to just let folks know who all who all is participating in this webinar. We are very thankful. We have Curtis Johnson, a part of the CCUSA team here, who works on the housing priority. We also have Zach Cahalan on the disaster operations team here at CCUSA. We have several Catholic Charities colleagues that will be with us today. From the Archdiocese of New Orleans, we have Shawla and Kevin. From the Catholic Charities of Arkansas, we have Patrick Gallagher, who will be with us. And from Florida Conference of Catholic Bishops, we'll have Gabe Tischler. And we're so very excited. We have a special guest that comes to us from outside of the network, from the National Low Income Housing Coalition. She is definitely a leading expert in disaster housing. We have with us Deborah Susie. So definitely look forward to hearing from all of them today. And I turn it over to Curtis Johnson.
And Curtis, your mic will be unmuted momentarily.
Oh, right. Curtis?
All right, I'm here. Can you hear me fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, about a year ago, the Housing and Disaster Strategic Priorities at Catholic Charities USA engaged in several conference calls, and you can see by the slide all of those that were a part of those conference calls to basically examine affordable housing issues in the context and how they pertain to disasters. So when disaster and housing started this exploration, the housing guy that I was interested in learning about the issues that CCUSA disaster responders dealt with, not only in general, but in terms of what kind of affordable housing challenges they came up and had to address. So you can see, I think we had 20 agencies there that were a part of that call session. I think it was 4 or 5, so, but we were happy to have them. Anyway, much of the work of CCUSA Housing's Community of Practice focuses on unit production. And knowing that most areas in the country and where CCUSA member agencies work currently face a critical shortage of housing, affordable housing at the beginning, unit production has been one of our focuses. But I think the next slide is what lays out the important issues that we uncovered in the telephone calls. And as you can see there, that it was severe pre-disaster affordable housing shortages, as we talked about already in urban and rural areas of the country, how the shortage of housing inventory affects living conditions in all phases of disaster, and the consistent challenges that emerge across that can be categorized in the 4 buckets, and I believe Zach will go into that more. But at the end of the day, this webinar continues our process, our being housing and disaster, of trying to align the contributions of both communities of practice towards solving or at least alleviating the challenges of affordable housing, both pre and post disasters. So for me, as we continue this process, I think as a houser, as I like to call us, we're looking to develop a plan or process that will inform CCUSA member housing agencies on productive ways to respond to the affordable housing needs during and after a disaster, to explore proactive planning steps that us housers can take with guidance from disaster professionals before disaster strikes, and finally, consider and start to look at the resources that CCUSA member agencies and associated dioceses already have and can make available to disaster response. And by that, I mean things like we're dealing with lack of affordable housing. Let's take a look at surplus church property if that's available, or temporary shelter plans at facilities already owned and operated by our member agencies. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thanks.
All right, outstanding. And I'll go ahead and just take our next slide from there before giving way to our illustrious presenters who are co-presenting the content here today. Just to really foot stomp a bit of what Curtis said, I mean, our objectives here today are to really share the results of those listening sessions with the network at large, so we can really broaden that conversation with the widest and most diverse experiences of agencies that we can. And then in addition, learn from each other, from the different, again, experiences you've had both in experiencing the challenges and looking to address some of those challenges, and really hear from you all, both how you would like us as CCUSA, as a membership organization, to continue to try to help provide leadership and resources to you all on these issues, and then also make sure you walk away from today's webinar with some resources that can help you in the future. So it is just another step in this journey that continues to be really of increasing importance and priority as both housing is not getting any more affordable and disasters are only increasing. So with that as prelude, challenge number one. So as we looked to bucket these, we really saw challenges across the board. Three types of challenges can kind of be grouped by those who are primarily impacted by them, but also we had challenges that are really germane to anyone who encounters this issue, and that's what we have here on this slide. First, there we see that folks, for varying reasons, have a preference to continue to live in hazardous conditions. This could be regardless of ownership status. Renters, owners, informally housed. Many are reluctant to leave their housing and choose to live in unsafe and toxic conditions. This is particularly true for those who are seniors, who may have trouble fully understanding the risk, may have emotional attachment to the home. And then we'll see when we look at some other slides here today, some additional reasons why folks may be unable or reluctant to leave due to some perverse incentives that are placed on them. But again, this is something we frequently see with seniors. Additionally, an inability to absorb economic shocks. There's a lot of studies out there these days that show most folks are hard-pressed to weather a $400 emergency. And the folks that our agencies, you all deal with on a day-to-day basis, and particularly those that you're serving in times of disaster, as we help the most vulnerable, have a really difficult time absorbing the unexpected expenses associated with disasters, all the way from evacuating, if it's a known notice event, such as a hurricane, where you have ample time to evacuate the area, or following the disaster. They simply don't have the cushion and can be vulnerable to any manner of fraudulent schemes when it comes to repairing the home, or as well predatory credit, and really any manner of schemes that look to target those who are in a hopeless situation often, and may be more apt to kind of fall for those sorts of things. We should additionally say, while not tied necessarily to housing, we do see vulnerable groups be increasingly affected in terms of domestic abuse, and human trafficking also does rise in the disaster context. Again, not specifically tied to this content, but worth mentioning. Again, number 3 here, something that is not new to anyone on this call, the not in my backyard mentality. NIMBY frequently affects decisions that are made in a post-disaster recovery environment. We may speak more to this here when we talk about some opportunities as it relates to community disaster block grants, disaster recovery, the CDBG-DR program. But many folks on these listening sessions shared with us how they have seen local jurisdictions take advantage of the opportunity in a post-disaster environment to kind of rezone, to explicitly make it more difficult for low-income housing or even mobile home parks to be allowed to be in the communities that were affected moving forward. So again, just a number of different things that can occur here. And fourthly, again, germane to all survivors, the lack of insurance or the underinsurance, whether you're a renter or an owner. We see this on disasters large and small, but specifically flood insurance is by far and away the most under covered hazard that folks have. But even beyond flood insurance, whether it be homeowners or renters, we frequently work with folks who do not have appropriate coverage, whether it's cost prohibitive or they weren't aware that that's something they needed. Again, the reasons vary, but our folks don't have that net to fall back on that many you may assume have to help support that recovery, and this obviously ties to the inability of the vulnerable to absorb the economic shocks associated with disasters. So again, pretty basic things here. I'm sure many of you have run across these works. With that as groundwork, I'm kind of excited to move on to some of the more specific issues that we've seen as it relates to affordable housing in disasters. And for that, we're going to turn to our colleagues in Catholic Charities, the Archdiocese of New Orleans, who are no strangers to disasters and serving those in need. Charlotte, can you hear us?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay. So the challenge number 2 are challenges that are uniquely to homeowners. And usually you'll find to track renters and homeowners, and each one has very specific challenges. But among them is the loss of equity, assets, and wealth. This is when the homeowner doesn't have flood insurance or doesn't have homeowners insurance, and they can't afford the repairs. And it will tie up with number 4 that has to do with deferred maintenance. There's a lot of times where the homeowner just can't afford or will lose all their possessions, and the money that FEMA gives them is really not enough to either complete the repairs or to provide for what they lost. They also, once they receive funding, there's a cost for transitional housing, or you have to pay rent when you're outside of your disaster area, and they usually deplete very quickly the funds that FEMA gave them or the insurance gave them, and they didn't use them towards their repair, and then they go back to a home that needs repairs, and mortgages that require that you continue to use insure your home, but if you don't fix your home, then your insurance costs will go up, and it's just like a never-ending cycle that in some cases brings the family to bankruptcy. Refusal to leave the disaster-affected home due to many reasons: personal attachment to the property, the house that they were born and they were raised, where they raised their kids, and they choose to leave there even if it's unsafe, unsecure, and unsanitary. It also may be that the home has been paid off, and they live, for example, in Social Security, and their home has been paid off, and they just don't have or never had enough money to pay for the insurance. And if they had been victims of previous disasters and FEMA had assisted them, then the insurance will be a requirement, and if for the rest of their life they have to maintain their property insurance, but they don't have enough funding to be able to afford that insurance. So it becomes like a vicious cycle. You get assisted once, if you're unable to keep your insurance, then you're going to be kicked out again. And usually in disaster-prone areas like ours, this is something that we deal on daily basis. They get affected by one hurricane, and then they don't maintain the insurance, and FEMA comes, and then they get denied, and they don't ever get the resources to replace their home or repair their homes, and then they just choose to leave in unsafe conditions, and they do not leave the disaster area. Lack of clear title. This is one of the hardest things that we see across every disaster, and I don't know how many of you have experiences, but that's certainly a huge problem for us here. Family-owned properties that have been passed down from generation to generation, either the family doesn't know or doesn't care, or is not a big deal for them to clear the title, and having clear ownership of the homes makes all the difference in the assistance that they're going to receive. You have to prove that you're the homeowner to receive FEMA assistance. You also, for many of the groups that come in to help, be that a volunteer agency, a long-term recovery organization, or even an organization such as yourself, we would not touch a home that we don't know who the owner is. So that clear title affects everything. A lot of the times, a homeowner will be denied assistance from FEMA because they couldn't prove that they were the owner. So early on in the disaster, and even when you're doing your emergency preparedness, you should be trying to advocate and educate your clients to have a clear title to their properties. Another issue that comes up that is not exactly a clear title but fits along, we also have a lot of problems or fixing homes that are rent to own or lease to own, because it might be owned by a bank or it might be owned by another entity, so you really don't have permission to enter that property. And with these properties that are inherited, and there's 12 people who inherit the home, you have to get consent from all 12 of them to be able to either transfer the title to this person or give consent to fix the property, and that is very lengthy. So early on, you have to engage pro bono lawyers or a legal entity that can help you quickly clear the title, because your window for appeals is very short. So this is something that can be fixed, but it takes time and needs to be planned ahead of time. And then finally,
Charla, real quick to interrupt, specific to that issue, have you found any community groups, advocacy groups, pro bono lawyer groups? Are there any resources you might be able to recommend to folks who might come across this issue based on your experience, or is it all hyper-local to your area of New Orleans?
We have very local to our area. We work, Appleseeds works a lot on training pro bono lawyers in helping addressing these, because they consider this as a national crisis, so there might be resources in your area. And Appleseed also has kind of like a guide on how to clear the titles. Sometimes it's very easy, but it will depend on where you are and what type of laws you have to clear the title, if there's like a fast way of clearing it or not. We partner with Southeast Legal here, which is also pro bono, and Southeast usually receives funding from United Way, and one of the things that we did for these last disasters is United Way, as soon as the disaster hit, supported with a grant Southeast Legal so that they can provide this type of counseling and help us clear titles, because we knew that was going to be a problem for our area. So United Way usually is a partner in the long-term recovery committees. And if you address this early on with them, then you might be able to get something in quickly as you move through the disaster.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then the final one that we have is deferred maintenance. And one of the things that happen when FEMA comes in, and FEMA will only repair the home to the pre-disaster condition. And then sometimes that means that you have to bring the client back to a state where it was unsafe, unsecure, and unsanitary. The other thing that happens is when FEMA does the site visit and they see deferred maintenance, they immediately basically deny the client. And sometimes the problem is it's very hard to tell what's the difference between deferred maintenance and the disaster-related need or the disaster-related damage. And sometimes they are very, very related to each other. The deferred maintenance cause some vulnerability, that make the disaster need to happen. For example, if the rafters of the roof were rotten, then the roof came off in a second with the first gust of wind. But that's something. And then when you're trying to repair that home, FEMA will only give you, for example, funding to replace the spot, but you can't send a group of volunteers on an unsafe roof and just say, I'm just going to put a patch when the whole roof might cave. So that is what we mean about deferred maintenance. It has a lot of high cost. And not only is this an issue for FEMA that will only address disaster-related conditions, but it usually comes with your donor intent. Your donors usually say, no, I only want to address disaster-related items. In your LTRO, your long-term recovery committees might say, we're only going to fix disaster-related items, and sometimes you can't not address the deferred maintenance because it makes it unsafe for the homeowner. You can't really just go and put drywall and not address the electrical and things like that. So this is something that becomes costly, and it is a complicated issue to address because you have a fine line where when you have generational poverty in homes that have been in disrepair for a very long time, what you address and what you don't address. So that is an issue. On the other hand, you also have to look at it. You can't just send volunteer crews and put them at jeopardy. So that becomes a problem. One of the things that we do early on is like the first person that we hire as a very good contractor estimator, so that we can present very strong appeals to FEMA to clarify what is the disaster-related need and what was not caused by the disaster. And then we also have finally pre-disaster condition bias. This is also not only related to you coming in and saying, oh, everything is deferred maintenance, but it also has to do with what is defined as a home. So a lot of the issues that we face is like they're bringing into the pre-disaster condition, and they say, well, it was a bus. Like if somebody lives in non-traditional homes like sheds and buses and storage containers, that had been converted into a home, then you have a very hard time defining that as a home, or people who live, for example, off the grid and they don't have the electrical bill or the water bill because they had a well and they put electrical panels and they converted the shed into their home, but they have no way of proving it. So when FEMA comes in, no, it's just a storage unit. And it's not a storage unit, it's a shed that was converted into a home that had been fixed as a home. And that creates a problem. And we've seen that more in the more recent years where people are getting more creative about the type of homes that they live and how they live, that makes you get very creative with your appeals, basically, on how do you define a home and what type of advocacy you do around. For us, we have had to do a lot of advocacy around that issue at the long-term recovery committee level, so that these homes that we just couldn't get them approved by FEMA get repaired through the use of funding of the LTRO, because we can prove that it's a home. So that's basically what we have as challenges unique to homeowners.
Thank you so much. Just very moving, really, to consider just alone in that bucket the challenges of some of the folks who really are most in need of help and having a really tough time getting it. Thanks so much for sharing on that. And Shala will be on with us throughout the webinar through the Q&A portion as well. So please consider questions you may have on this or any other topic related to homeowners. With that, we're going to go ahead and hand the mic over to Patrick. Patrick, you're live.
I'm Patrick Gallagher. I'm the Executive Director for Catholic Charities of Arkansas, and I'm here with Tracy Eichenberger, who is our Disaster Preparedness and Response Coordinator. I'm here to talk about, how do we get to challenge 3? There we go. Unique challenges to renters, and Arkansas presents the worst case scenario for renters in general in the United States. There's an exceptionally strong Realtors Association that controls our legislature on these issues, and there is an exception for public housing and Section 8 housing, which are controlled by federal rules. But in general, Arkansas law favors the owners of rental units. Landlord-tenant law is really skewed towards the landlords. And what this results in is not exactly a shortage of affordable housing, but a shortage of affordable, clean, and safe housing. And that's particularly concerning after a disaster event. In Arkansas, the exact wording of a lease governs the relationship between a landlord and a tenant. And as we all know, landlords write the leases. They furnish those. So unless there's a specific written provision in the lease, no duty is created for a landlord. In Arkansas, there is no implied warranty of habitability. That means that a landlord is not required to provide a fit place to live when a unit is first rented. So a landlord can rent a place that has leaky pipes or a leaky roof or other issues. And the landlord does not have a legal duty to make repairs that might arise during the course of the leasehold unless there's a specific lease provision. Not only that, but the law in Arkansas gives a general immunity to landlords for injuries that can occur as a result of unsafe conditions arising on the property during a leasehold. A renter cannot withhold rent to make repairs. In fact, if there's a health and safety condition that arises on the property, it's the responsibility of the renter to repair that. If the renter does not make the necessary health and safety repairs, the landlord can enter the property, make the repairs, and charge the renter for the cost of the repairs. Arkansas has two forms of eviction law. First, the civil eviction, and that's relatively standard. It's like the eviction statutes that exist in other jurisdictions. The timelines for notice and are probably a little shorter. But Arkansas also has a criminal eviction statute, and that is where the landlord can terminate a lease, go to court, get a writ of eviction, serve the tenant, and if the tenant doesn't comply, then go back to the court, and the tenant can be charged with a misdemeanor, and the penalty is limited to fines, a daily fine for each day the tenant has remained in the premises since the eviction. All of these things factor into disaster. After a disaster, there's no duty for a landlord to repair. And Tracy, in her practice, has found that, like particularly after a flood, landlords, they don't want to do the things that are necessary to make a rental unit habitable.
Yes, we had situations in 2015 flooding in southeast Arkansas, and the landlord or rental unit owner, their idea of repairs was to remove the carpeting, if it had carpeting, and then to just paint over any part of the wall that had been wet. And their idea was to paint that with Kilz, and that would prevent or, take care of any mold issues without realizing how much the mold could grow inside the wall. And we ended up with a couple of folks even having health issues as a result of staying in some of these units after that type of repair was made. And we had teams down there that were willing to go in and do the debris removal for the landlord, just to make it safe as far as the mold remediation. But a lot of them would not allow that to be done, because then they would be on the hook to make the further repairs.
That's all we got. Any questions?
We do have one question in, Patrick. Where can someone find out the status of their local laws on these issues that you have referenced?
Probably Google is a good place to start. I found that I can get away with doing at least the initial legal research using a good Google search and not have to pay to do a proprietary legal database search with Westlaw or LexisNexis, something like that. Also, we have a good relationship with our Center for Arkansas Legal Services, Legal Aid, and they help us as being advocates to try to change our landlord-tenant laws, and that's a thankless task. But they also have fairly good educational materials. So looking for the website of a state's or a local legal aid society might reveal some good educational materials about rental rights in a particular area.
Thanks. Thank you, Patrick. Something we just wanted to call attention to, I'm sure you all saw it on this slide. We put in an excerpt from a Kaiser Family Foundation report that was recently done in regards to Hurricane Harvey. And one of the issues that really come into play here is that folks are fearful often to leave their rental unit, because it's so difficult to find affordable housing that can replace that, and they don't want to get a black mark for breaking their lease. And so again, as Patrick mentioned, when the law really favors disproportionately one side over the other in these sorts of disputes or situations, it really makes it, again, an incredibly perverse incentive for the renter to stay in damaged and toxic and unsafe housing conditions. And you can click on that link and read more about that report, but just wanted to make sure folks knew that was kind of a clickable thing, and they can learn more about what that report found. Having no other questions, I believe, for Patrick. There may be one more as we reference the chat box here. Hold on momentarily. Okay, yeah, outstanding. I think we're in good shape. Patrick, thank you so much, and he also will be with us throughout the webinar and available for the Q&A portion as well. When we first had our listening session with Patrick and Tracy, we were blown away and thought that this cannot be true. Right? There's no way that this could possibly be true, but it is, and again, it varies location to location. But hopefully this can help paint a picture of the fact that the opportunity to advocate and alleviate disaster issues in affordable housing aren't only after the disaster hits. The time is right long before the disaster ever occurs when it comes to many of these situations, such as the local laws as they exist for renters and landlords. So thank you, Patrick. With that, we're going to go ahead and move on to our next slide here. I believe we have Gabe Tiskler with us of the Florida Conference of Catholic Bishops, and he leads all things disaster for our Catholic Charities agencies in the state of Florida, and he'll be focusing on challenges unique to mobile home residents. Take it away.
And Gabe, just to make sure, I see that you're definitely with us on the webinar, but I'm not too sure if you're dialed in, so please dial in. I did send you the audio pin, so please dial in so you'll be able to speak to this slide.
All right, let's see if I have any texts from Gabe here. Give Gabe a moment to troubleshoot, and if not, we'll see if we can just begin some of this content on his behalf. While we wait, one of the questions that came in was as it relates to climate change and disasters. Certainly there are a number of resources that affect and deal with climate change advocacy. There have been some recent changes to allow FEMA portions of FEMA awards to be spent toward mitigation measures. Certainly, one of the areas where climate change and disasters comes into play is with the difficult program that is the National Flood Insurance Program. As climate conditions change faster than the ability to map them accurately with our national flood maps, it becomes increasingly difficult to accurately identify areas that are most at risk and mandated to participate in the NFIP program. And as that program likely continues to grow in terms of the expansive area that would be required to have flood insurance, it makes the ability to sustain the program even more difficult. The disasters of Katrina and Sandy put the program more than $25 billion in debt, and I'm not sure what the new figure is after this latest round of disasters. So climate change is going to just put more and more folks at risk, and it's going to really further exacerbate the issues that we have in terms of our federal programs to help assist those who are at risk. And the affordability issue continues to be a thorn in the sides of legislators who look to reform the program. So it's a tough issue. There's no easy answer. To the extent we can make data-driven decisions and support the federal investment measures to mitigate, everyone would be better off. Gabe, I think that's all the questions we've had. So if you are not with us, I will go ahead and begin to speak to these. And if you come online, just take it away, okay? All right, Gabe, I have your text here that says you're on. We cannot hear you. So just continue to try to troubleshoot, and when we hear you come on, we'll hand it over your way. So we do have a number of challenges that are unique, unique to mobile home residents. One is just the structural integrity of these units. They are not built to withstand severe storms by any stretch of the imagination. And so that is frequently why you see, following severe weather events, that if there are fatalities, it is often in areas, particularly for tornadoes and severe wind, areas that are populated by mobile homes. They are also disproportionately flooded. They tend to be in low-lying areas, many of the mobile home parks, and these folks are, again, adversely impacted. What compounds their vulnerability. Actually, let me take a quick step back. We had this does create a bit of a conundrum, a bit akin to what Shaula shared earlier, in terms of repairing and supporting some of the repair needs of these units to mitigate to what we just talked about with the climate change question. We had an agency in Colorado do everything they could to do extra mitigation measures on the roofs of some of the mobile home units that they were supporting after a storm. But again, had misgivings about it, knowing that it can only do so much, but these folks had nowhere else to go. And so what we find is just, again, the state that we're in when it comes to affordable housing and the ability of folks to identify areas they can go creates really tough decisions when it comes to those seeking to help those in the most impactful way. Again, when we look at challenges unique to mobile home residents, most mobile home residents, they own the unit and they pay a relatively low fee to park that unit for a specified period of time. So again, similar to already having essentially paid off your home, to use that analogy, there typically is not a plan, a budget plan to go ahead and pay for new housing costs when it comes to a monthly payment for your housing beyond that low park fee. And so when these units are destroyed, they're just not prepared for whatever that may be. And if they want to move their unit, it's extremely cost prohibitive to move it from one location to another. And so mobile home residents, owners of these units or rent to own of these units frequently find themselves in a catch-22 situation when it comes to what to do following these disasters, whether it's wind, water, hail, whatever the case may be. Again, similar to what we discussed earlier, although with a slight difference, the building materials of many of the mobile homes, newer mobile homes may not be the case, but certainly those built within the last 20 to 30 years often are built with things that are toxic, whether it be asbestos, lead, other materials that can create toxic conditions when exposed to water, and it's just simply unsafe for volunteers to support any muck-out home repairs. Contractors may be unwilling to go there. And so again, we end up finding a group of highly vulnerable people who no one wants to take responsibility or ability to help. And it's a very, very difficult group of folks to attempt to serve. We're going to see if Gabe is able to speak. Gabe, I know you've seen a lot of this stuff firsthand. Can you share any examples and round out a bit of what I've shared?
Yes, sir. Let's see if this works any better.
All right, go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
okay.
sir, you're
Great.
live.
Thank you. Well, yes, number one, you're right on track. It's, mobile homes are the poor people's housing. I mean, that's their home. So, they oftentimes have no choice but to live where they live, and that's in low-lying areas, which means that they're susceptible not only to flash floods, but what we're seeing in Florida is unregulated development and stormwater management. So what that leads to is flooding in areas that's simply low-income areas, especially, that simply did not flood ever before, and because of the development. So what we have done many times is for those mobile homes that are repairable is to raise them up. And we include that as part of the program and part of our mitigation program to ensure that, whatever repairs that we are able to do on those mobile homes are not going to get wasted during the next flood. And what we found is, and this has been in several parts of the country, the average cost of raising a mobile home is between $1,500 to $3,000. And of course, we look at, what flood levels there were, and, many times the floodplains maps simply don't include those areas. So that's one piece of mitigation that we've been able to do very successfully in Florida and in other parts of the country as well. Now, unless a mobile home is extremely damaged, we have found ways to be able to rebuild them and repair them. And we found that, roof repairs on mobile homes by contractors is entirely doable, even though many of them don't like to do them, especially when there's other work available out there. That being the number one thing that needs done after a windstorm and damaged roofs, that's our number one priority. Get those places from future damage, get them dried in, so we can start assessing what our next steps are. What we have also found that the average cost, the cost for repairing mobile homes have ranged anywhere between $3,000 to $15,000. Now, that seems like, a lot of money, $15,000 to repair a mobile home. We still can't build a new site-built home for that, and you certainly cannot buy a brand new mobile home for that either. We've done both, and, the cost comparison is just not there. So many times, that's the only solution is to go ahead and repair. Whenever we engage volunteer labor, we let them know that that's the work that we have, so they can kind of anticipate it. And our construction managers are well versed in how to deal with mobile homes, and if it includes ripping out the floors and rebuilding walls, well, then that's what we'll do. But I'm fully understanding that these homes are probably not going to qualify for any type of other assistance. So I say that because in Florida in particular, we have something that's called State Housing Initiative Program, SHIP, that repairs homes in normal times and after disasters as well. Well, if you're $1 over their income level, then you certainly don't qualify. And many counties simply don't repair mobile homes at all. That leaves us, Catholic Charities, to do, the work on these homes. Now, we've also found that many programs simply don't include mobile homes at all. So, for instance, the National VOAD's new construction points of consensus that is being put out, it does not include mobile homes, or very little of it addresses mobile home repair. And that's because of the misnomer that you can't repair mobile homes. Now, to take that a step further, knowing the average cost of mobile homes, our next issue has always been, in Florida in particular, is mobile home parks where the owners own the mobile home, but they do not own the lot. So since they don't own the lot that the mobile home is on, they're automatically disqualified for many types of assistance. So that leaves us a special challenge. In our case, when we do case management on those type of clients, then we make sure that all the taxes are paid, the mobile home is titled properly, much like a regular side-built home would be, except without homestead exemption. And then once those people qualify through case management, then we're able to effectively repair those homes as well. So I believe that covers the very basics of mobile home repair for me. The pre-existing toxic conditions that is listed here, And asbestos, we deal with those through our assessments, the initial and follow-up assessments of what model year the mobile home was built, and what other repairs have been done to that mobile home, and whether it does have asbestos, lead, or any other toxic components. We've seen asbestos in flooring, as well as insulation for pipes and chimneys. So it is a valid concern, but with proper planning, we're able to dispose of those toxic materials, according to law, and that's an important piece. Of course, we take every precaution possible to ensure that the volunteers that work on those mobile homes that have these kind of toxic conditions are well protected with protective equipment.
Thank you. And you've really demonstrated. That's all I have now.
Certainly.
And you've really demonstrated that the complexity, while it is more complex, many of, I'm not prepared to say one type of client is the most complex, but with enough diligence and desire to see it through, the complexity can be overcome if an agency desires to go ahead and go down that road. And you've really demonstrated that as it pertains to your work with mobile home residents. So thank you.
Zach, if I may just add real quick, one of the things that we do, as I said, is mitigation. So part of our mitigation program includes not only raising the home, but inspecting how it's tied down. So, if it's in a flood-prone area, of course, we want to work towards raising that home up. If it's not in a flood-prone area, then we review how that mobile home is tied down. So in many parts of the country, it's not required that more than 4 tie downs are attached to a mobile home. And to bring that up to National Hurricane Code, we hire contractors to install what the National Hurricane Code requires, and that's every 4-foot tie down in concrete. So I'll leave it at that.
No, that's ideal, and that's a great transition, really, to our next slide here. And I'm going to go fairly quickly through these to make sure we allow ample time for Q&A, as well as our special guest here, Deborah Susie with the NLIHC. So some best practices that folks from the listening sessions that we held a year back shared was, again, the need to coalition build and advocacy for affordable housing during blue sky, non-disaster times. The problem only gets worse following a disaster. So if anything you can do to move the needle in a steady state environment is definitely worth the effort. And I'll just, Deborah will really speak more to the CDBG-DR program, so hold on for that input. Educating donors. I think Charlotte shared a little bit how donors, even private donors, are hesitant to see deferred maintenance addressed and that pre-disaster condition bias. And it really is incumbent upon you all as Catholic Charities experts in disaster, in affordable housing, as leaders in your communities, to really educate donors and help them be comfortable with the need to lift the restrictions that may be associated with their gifts when it comes to helping those who are impacted by disasters. As you've heard across the spectrum on the stories shared here today, these are complex issues. And having rigid, clear, prohibitions on what qualifies for assistance when we're not dealing with federal funds makes it just really difficult to help those who really, really could use all the support they can get. Building back better, again, we're starting to see more traction with that to the mitigation efforts as well, both with federal funds as well as with non-federal funds. Any opportunity we can, we certainly would advocate for agencies to build back better whenever they can. Educating survivors, anything we can do to help educate those, particularly when it comes to those health risks, You know, many, in addition to all the perverse incentives they may have not to leave their home, are not aware of the risks that they face. And it really needs, you know, whether it's community leaders or Catholic Charities agencies, almost a door-to-door check following disasters. I recently had a chance to tour a neighborhood with the Cajun Navy in Lafayette, or not, Lake Charles, I'm sorry, it was in Lake Charles. And some of the stories of these folks who were living in homes months after, and sick as you can imagine, and really were not aware of why, is troubling. And so, again, all we can do to help those in need following disasters, any active measure you can take, support that. Academically, when we look at disaster research, social capital is often seen as the key to having nimble and agile communities that kind of work together to address tough issues. The Joplin response, and I think we have Cheyenne with southern Missouri, as well as recently there was some flooding in San Jose. The community really mobilized really well. So anything that can be done, again, to build coalitions, to build trust, to a sense of togetherness amongst communities and the different types of organizations within those kind of institutions that populate that community is a helpful thing to do. Gabe mentioned this as well as some others, the need to support mitigation and resilience building efforts. It isn't just with homes, but to the extent it can be done with homes, certainly pursue those. I believe there's currently a lawsuit, might be in Houston, around inadequate drainage in areas that were low income, and issues kind of tied to that. So again, it extends to floodplain management, to homes, to renter rights, all sorts of issues that are ripe for advocacy when it comes to these topics. And again, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention encouraging Catholic Charities agencies and really any other stakeholders that are considering building more affordable housing stock and taking advantage of some of the federal programs within HUD that exist to support those efforts. Anything we can do to alleviate the affordable housing burden, we want folks to do. So just a handful of best practices, and I want to hand it over now to Deborah and take it away.
Hi, this is Deborah. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity. It's a special privilege to me because I, for 30 years, was the head of an anti-poverty policy organization in Florida and had occasion to partner with the Catholic Conference going all the way back to its founder, Tom Horkin, and two subsequent directors. And as Gabe is part of that, changed its name from the Florida Catholic Conference at that time. But I also want to, I'm happy because my dad has been gone within the last year. We lost him, but he was an Italian immigrant. His mother died at an early age, and his father subsequently. And he used to always say, he would credit his raising to the nuns. He would say, the nuns raised me as a result of a free tuition program for Italian immigrant families without the means to attend Catholic school. So I'm sure he'd be very pleased to know we were having this conversation today. I didn't become a nun, but I have had the good fortune to wake up every morning and work at ensuring our nation's public policies take into consideration its most vulnerable and low-income communities. And you share that mission through your direct service on the ground. But I'm here to tell you, you're also a formidable advocacy front because of your proximity to the problems of the poor, because you come at the work from a moral imperative, and because elected officials know that when any of you speak, you are connected to a massive and diverse subset of voters that is the Catholic community. And that is powerful. I found that through all my years. It's a powerful leverage you are uniquely positioned to use in the service of securing public policies more responsive to the need like the ones you've outlined here, that you literally see all around you, especially in this year after the hurricanes and wildfires of 2017. So it's not enough just to address the immediate needs, but to look to the future and try to figure out how our nation can commit itself to policies that resolve some of these issues on a more permanent, ongoing basis. To do this alone, however, it will not get it done. Throwing a broader net and doing it collectively and will enhance your capacity, our capacity for making that permanent change. I coordinate a national coalition of over 600 organizations engaged with housing recovery for the most vulnerable residents in the multiple disaster areas. So whatever I might say about our coalition today, it can be applied to your municipal and state collaborations and partnerships with other organizations. In ours, we have largely combined legal advocates who know about federal programs and the making of public policy, similar to what I heard you talk about, together with people in the field who are working most intimately with and can speak most directly to the problems that need to be addressed. They each come to the table with the two parts that have made for an effective whole, and I'll give you an example. There was federal disaster, as many of you know, assistance comes with certain civil rights obligations prohibiting discrimination based on race, ethnicity, limited English proficiency, income, disability, and others comprising a protected class. They are ensured meaningful access to federal programs, benefits, and services in the Stafford Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Fair Housing Act, and so on. But they are only as good as they are applied, and you can only determine that with well-documented and public data. There is an organization that is the sister organization of United Farm Workers of America. It was developed by Cesar Chavez back in 1989. And they actually have a lawsuit and an appeal that has been filed in Texas, and we are proud to be part of an amicus brief for that. And I can tell you that I want to give you an example of one of the plaintiffs, of which there are 26. All of them are low income, all of them are Hispanic, and all of them are homeowners. And in this particular compelling case, there is a father with a wife and 3 kids. And I'll just read to you real quick from his document. He says that, and this was a couple years ago, this is not from last year's storm. When the storm started picking up, I was at home with my wife and 3 children. The storm happened in the evening when the whole family was sleeping. I woke up to the sound of hail hitting the windows. All of a sudden, the wind blew open my locked front door and tore off a chunk of our living room wall. When this happened, pictures in the house flew off the walls. I could see debris flying around outside and smashing into the home and the vehicles parked outside. At that point, I took my wife and children and went to the back bedroom to wait out the storm. The wall that had fallen in the living room had an electrical socket that was ripped apart by the wind. Part of the wall that fell landed on top of the now open front door. The living room got soaked, including the carpet, flooring, sheetrock, and insulation. The water and wind that rushed into the house ruined more than half of the living room. The heavy rain and strong winds also blew many shingles from the roof and structurally damaged the roof. The roof damage led to leaks in the bathroom and one of the bedrooms and living area. The rain leaking into the bedroom knocked down most of the sheetrock from the ceiling, and now there is also mold growing on the wall behind the toilet and the shower. Before the storm, there was a small detached room behind my house. The storm completely blew the room away. Naturally, he called in FEMA, and they came out and inspected this damage and awarded him $1,414 for home repairs. Of course, he appealed, and he, in the process, secured a private contractor to come up with some estimates to contest this amount. And that, for the roof alone, the contractor estimated the roof at $1,900 and $8,000 for the remainder of the house. FEMA did adjust its award by $983. So now that's still less than $2,500. Mind you, this was with no inspection on the roof. No one went up to look at it, and no explanation. The family still lives, as far as I know, with their adult daughter and her family. So basically the attainment of home ownership, which is what a lot of you are working for your clients, add instead to the category of homeless virtually overnight. The story is, among others, denied some or all of the home repair assistance in the absence of an explanation of legal standards or facts that FEMA relied upon to deny the assistance, standards absent also for any appeals. And so this is something some of you are already familiar with and have dealt with, but basically it all goes back to policy with one of the federal agencies that spends tax dollars money and wanting them to be as transparent as possible so that we can assess how well the recovery is going for those most vulnerable. The lack of transparency of FEMA data and the way it is collected and used to determine eligibility for assistance, it prevents us from assessing how and if federal disaster resources are reaching those populations we're most concerned about, the most vulnerable. And this has been the most oft-cited problem by advocates across all the 2017 disaster venues, including the wildfires in California and the 3 or 4 hurricanes on this side. Now, arguably, the only positive thing about having so many disasters occur across the nation last year in such a short period of time is that it has provided us with a rare opportunity to effectively coalesce around more forward-thinking policies and programs than dealing with the challenges of a disaster one at a time, as we've been doing, starting over as though it was the very first time we'd ever experienced this. And so what we've been able to do with our coalition is sharing stories on a national forum which reveals the true size of the problems that keep coming up disaster after disaster and going unchecked. The collaboration, by collaborating with the other organizations, it also puts us together to implement more rapid response, happily stealing models from each other that are working to address innumerable challenges in multiple fields in real time. An example is we have on our part of our network is Lone Star Legal Aid, and they were able to address the problem that was mentioned in the very first of this webinar about the lack of title. And they applied state estate law and the passing down of property automatically upon death and talked to FEMA and created affidavits that would basically take the testimony of 3 individuals and then present that as an alternative document to legal title. Because what needs to happen is to prove occupancy ownership to receive aid. FEMA not only accepted this affidavit and agreed to use it going forward, and it advised all of their FEMA representatives across the state of Texas to go and do likewise, but they also agreed to reassess all the appeals that Lone Star had submitted to them and reverse their decisions in cases where this document would have applied. The wonderful thing about this, when we have a national collaboration with people from various areas and affected, we have the same problem. It's not unique, and it wasn't unique to prior storms, as you've mentioned. But Puerto Rico is still having a particularly difficult time with this, and I had the good fortune to hear the mayor of Ponce talk about the point at which Hurricane Maria came onto the island. And on that island was a hillside of families that had lived in this area for generations, none of whom had legal title to the property in any kind of legal fashion. And when FEMA, and so they developed ways to exist while they awaited FEMA's arrival. And when FEMA did come, none of them were granted any emergency assistance. And these are folks whose entire homes had basically blown away or collapsed. And so it's a problem that Puerto Rico was excited to hear about the model that Texas had put forth, and especially the actual invitation of the FEMA administrators to go out and see, not that they were going to do it, but that we as a collaborative could see where this might be applied in other communities. And we are in the process of putting together our probate estate attorneys on the island with their knowledge of Puerto Rican inheritance law, with our seasoned legal professionals in various other states and in DC who had experience with prior storms, to see what we can work out together. That was one of the benefits of our having that kind of national collaboration. It has also been great to have colleagues who are veterans from past super disasters, like Katrina and Sandy, and we have pulled them in to help the newer advocates for these more recent storms. I've started to think of us as the Match.com of disaster housing recovery, but it's been a very effective way to help. And without them, we may have missed the absence this year of a very important tool in FEMA's toolbox that they made a decision not to use, which was actually developed from Katrina and refined through subsequent storms, and that's the Disaster Housing Assistance Program, or DHAP, and that is great because, as you realize, you need wraparound services. It's sometimes, as you've already described, there are many situations in which folks don't just need their house to be rehabbed, they also need some wraparound case management services to help them find permanent housing solutions if they're displaced, secure employment, and connect to public benefits that will help them to prepare to assume full responsibility for their housing costs at the end of the program. The slide that you have in front of you provides you with some ways to engage with us. You have an excellent, I think the must-have for applying your direct service and experience to policy for long-term lasting change that can benefit everyone over the long haul is to connect to an effective national advocate, as you are doing right now with Catholic Charities USA. And then here are some of the resources, and I would invite you also, if it's useful, to join us. We provide weekly updates with all the information that I spend all week and our staff to collect that might be useful for you, in addition to models that your colleagues are implementing in other areas. And there's a sign up there where you can join. That's how you get on that. And then we have semi-monthly or bi-monthly meetings where we invite you and your colleagues to share what's been going on, especially relative to policies. One of the resources that's brand new that you would be it would be a help to us if you were to utilize it is the client testimonials. It's an anonymous provision of stories that you have heard that are particularly compelling that we could use together, whether at the state level or the federal level, to share with policymakers who are inspired to work a little harder to change the policies that you all have helped identify as would be useful. And then the third piece there, many of you may be, and I hope you are, participating in, if you're in Florida or Puerto Rico, Texas has just passed, the large amount of CDBG, Community Development Block Grant disaster recovery money that's coming your way has now entered the State Action Plan review process, in which you are provided 14 days of public input once it's released. And this resource that is listed there is an easy outline for you to understand how that process works and how you can become involved. And those in Florida definitely have till Friday, this Friday, close of business, to send your concerns about the plan, what it lacks, what it needs for you to be more effective. And also, of course, some of you may be recipients of this funding depending on how it's written up, and you need to be aware of that. I just want to say, even with this, our big goal is to stop having so much reliance on individual federal registers for every storm and every pot of money, but maybe looking at now we're moving toward a CDBG-DR program in statute, which means certain things would be automatic and would be immediately available for those who you serve, rather than waiting months and years to get the housing assistance that HUD can provide. And finally, you also have an opportunity now there's a 45-day window. We're at least a week or so into it. And this is the opportunity, and you all are the experts, you truly are, about how FEMA's individual assistance program could work better for those you serve and for your operations relative to policy going forward. This is something we encourage you also to take advantage of. I just want to thank you again for the opportunity and all the good work that you do, and I appreciate the invitation to come and join you today.
Oh gosh, thank you, Deborah. As you can all no doubt tell, Deborah knows her stuff and has access to a very active network who can help troubleshoot issues, and would just highly encourage you to sign up for that newsletter that she mentioned, the Disaster Recovery Housing Coalition. All of us here at the office are signed in, and they're really well done, and we are continually learning about the latest developments as it relates to different disasters and policy changes that are occurring. So it's a valuable resource. Even if you aren't having a disaster right now, you don't know when you will in the future, I'd encourage you to sign up and stay in touch with this fantastic organization. With that, we're going to go ahead and allow for some Q&A, as much time as we have here. And so these are just suggested questions we have on here to get the kind of creative juices going. You are by no means restricted to these topic areas. So I know Simona has some questions in queue already. She'll be going ahead and facilitating, excuse me, questions you may have, and for whom you may have them. And any of our panelists are welcome to respond. And then as well, even if you have new ideas of things that you've been doing, resources you want to share that were not included in the webinar, please feel free to offer up those as well.
Absolutely. So we received a lot of great information just in terms of, the various unique challenges that survivors, homeowners, mobile home owners and renters have experienced in different best practices. I'm going to open up the mic to those who definitely were providing a lot of just helpful resources in the chat box. So I definitely want to start there and just offer that you just share some of that information that you are putting in the chat box. So right now, mics are being open, specifically Shay, Grace. I know you had some questions and just some dialogue that you wanted to share, as well as Jane and also Monica. So I'll open those first and then gradually unmute everyone. So if you have questions, and again, you can respond to those directly on the screen, but please type in if you have some additional questions that aren't on the screen, rather. And definitely, Shay, I did want to lead with you because you have so many resources that I felt like folks on this webinar could benefit from.
Thanks, appreciate it. Thank you, first of all, for putting the webinar together and having such great speakers. I just tremendously love hearing all the things that are going on out there. We don't feel so much in a vacuum, that we're all alone in our struggles for housing. Just a couple of the things that I shared in the question box earlier in the chat box were, we were talking briefly on mitigation strategies, and one of the things we saw prior to my role here in Catholic Charities was at the county level, E&D, and one of those practices put into play in the Joplin recovery was breakaway roof systems for housing during the rebuild process. We found out a lot of the roofs collapsed because of the force and Bernoulli's principle, and helped those facilities collapse. So some of the green builders with ideas coming out of the woodwork were to create collapsible or breakaway parts to the eaves that would allow the eaves to blow off, but not the whole roof structure. And so you didn't have that prying effect. So that was
a mitigation strategy. It wasn't that much costly per square foot, but it didn't really take hold like we were hoping. But again, another, trying to put those mitigation strategies into play was, I just wanted to support what everybody else was discussing earlier. One of the COADs here in southern Missouri is putting together a regional COAD workshop. It's a 4-hour workshop working with FEMA Region 7 to bring in smaller county agencies that may be a part-time EMD or they don't have a COAD developed, and that 18 county regions doing that 4-hour workshop to share best practices. We don't have a regional concept in Southwest Missouri, but there is one in the Kansas City area called the MARC, and one in St. Louis called SLARC, and then in the Cape Girardeau area they have one. So we're trying to formulate something with them called a regional multi-agency coordination center. We had 18 MARCs activated last spring during the flooding over a 12-day period, and a regional MARC system would help us guide that recovery effort ongoing. But one of the hurdles we had is the Red Cross labeled this as a Category 1, which brought in all their national responders and took all our local responders and put them at their positions. So it was really challenging putting on 18 MARCs in 12 days for a Catholic Charities agency that has, a handful of case managers. So we thought this regional MARC approach could help plan with those large-scale MARC events. So those are a couple things that we see. Is anything I'm missing?
No, that was everything. Thank you so very much, just again for sharing it with everyone. Thank you for that. That's very helpful. Definitely at this point, Grace, your mic is also unmuted. I know you had your hand up and you wanted to, be able to share a little bit. So the mic is yours.
Hi, this is Grace. How are you all?
Good. Yeah, thank you.
Yes. So I'm from Catholic Charity in San Antonio. I'm the case manager for disaster relief position that came on board in December. So one of the things that I did for my clients was walk out and meet the communities that had HUD housing. And I was able, and still am, through the process, having my families be put on the priority list with a referral from our office to them. And that's been doing our families really good. So one thing that we need to do is just go into those apartment complexes, go into the actual main system. The main property managers that are helping me, and one of the companies is Prospero Properties. And they do a lot of housing here in the San Antonio area. And they have about 27 different communities. And within those 27 communities, I've housed about 47 families. And out of those 47, I have about 17 from Puerto Rico, and the rest are from Hurricane Harvey.
Wow.
Yes,
Thank you
it's
for that.
Yeah, and I'm an advocate for asking, and I'm always asking, and all they can tell me is no, but I always go into the doors and knock on doors, and I say, hey, this is what's going on. Hurricane Harvey is still, alive, and a lot of people are shocked to know that we still have families in hotels from Hurricane Harvey, and not to mention Hurricane Maria now. So it was a challenge at first until I started knocking on doors, but our families are doing better in the sense that we've been able to get them into affordable housing. And I have a client paying as little as $1 all the way to maybe $400 in rental of a 2- and 3-bedroom apartments.
No, thank you for sharing that. It's definitely good to hear, the different experiences that everyone is, experiencing. Anyone else have a question for any of the panelists or would like to provide any kind of feedback on the questions that are on screen? Please utilize the hand raise tool. and then we can go from there in terms of unmuting your mic. You'll see that if we have multiple mics on, you know, it just causes a little bit of an echo. So I didn't release everyone's mic, but definitely utilize the hand raising tool, or if you have a question, you can certainly put it into the chat box, and that can be addressed while we're here together as a group.
While we look to wrap up here, I just want to take a quick moment again to thank all of our panelists for their help and really everyone who participated on the listening sessions as well. You saw that list of 20 or so agencies, but specifically as it relates to today's content, I want to make sure our friends in the Archdiocese of New Orleans, Shala, thank you so much, as well as in Arkansas, Patrick Gallagher and Teresa Eichenberger, thank you so much for taking the time to contribute. Gabe Tiskler down there in Florida, with Florida Conference of Bishops, and Deborah Susie. Really rely on not only those folks who presented, but each other across the agencies in your state, us here at CCUSA. We really do want to know, Curtis, Kim, myself, everyone here, we want to do what we can to advocate for the priorities and seek solutions for the priority issues that you're working through on this topic, as well as other topics. So engage in the community of practice, if that's not something you're already doing, where we can continue to have these discussions in a smaller forum. We'd love to continue to do that and be a support to you all. Simona as well, thank you so much for driving and helping facilitate today's webinar. Do we have any other questions that came in?
We have a question from Shay, and I'm definitely going to unmute Curtis, Deborah, and Zach if you all would respond to it. Shay asked if, he said our community used to have, you know, is there any good affordable housing online locator used by our agencies? So again, if you or Curtis would like to speak to that, that would be great. All right, Curtis, and your mic is unmuted.
I am here. So can you say the question again? It was kind of...
Sure. If there was any online locator for affordable housing that's being utilized by our agencies and networks?
I can tell you, we basically use the same sources that the agencies would go state by state and go to the state agencies. And I also find that the National Low Income Housing Coalition that Deb represents has sometimes locator services on there. But, you know, it's always a challenge. And a lot of times, just to be truthful, you go on these services and you're basically finding out about units that are occupied, have wait lists, and all those challenges. Now, I'm not saying don't approach them, because, you know, I even tell clients, get on the wait list, but, you know, that's the reality of the affordable housing shortage across the country.
Could I add to that?
This is Steve Kapobers.
Steve Kapobers. We have a website that we push people towards called socialserve.com. And on there, you can click on the state and click on the city, and it'll have a listing of all affordable properties, unit mixes, any special qualifications, and who to call to check on availability. So we use that with our clients.
Oh, thank you, Steve. Deborah, do you have anything to add on this point? Hearing none, I know that I can't speak to how good it is. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was talking away. I was saying that I'm steeped in disaster, but I can certainly check in with one of our staff here and see what resource there is, and then share it with you afterwards to share with everyone.
You got it. Yes, we will certainly share that. All I was going to mention, and I'm sure NLIHC does this as well, but in the past, I have gone to affordablehousingonline.com, more so because they're very quick in their kind of national budget analysis when you know, the House or Senate releases a budget that impacts affordable housing. they are quick to analyze that and show the change over time. So I know that work that they do is pretty good, and they also offer, resources around low-income apartments and waiting lists. I can't speak to the fidelity of those search functions, but the other work that they do does appear to be quality. And that's affordablehousing.online.com. Okay, with that, we're going to call it a day. We said 90 minutes, and we're going to hit it right on the dot. So thank you, everyone, for contributing. Any additional resources we receive, we will share out, and I believe you can download today's presentation right off the webinar. This has been recorded, so if you thought while you watched it that, oh man, I'd love for my colleague to watch this internal to the agency or be a part of this external, or maybe a partner you work with, we are going to make it available on the member portal for folks to access. So you can look for it there, and thank you again for engaging. Have a great night.
Thank you.
All right.